Welcome to this deep dive. In these rather tense global times, we feel it's crucial to offer a calm, professional, and strictly fact-based look at the key Middle East developments from the past week. Our focus today is navigating the very complex layers of diplomacy and conflict surrounding the ceasefire attempts in Gaza.
Exactly. Our mission here is to really dissect the essential information we've gathered from recent intelligence reports. We're focusing particularly on that highly fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. We'll be analyzing, how viable this truce really is and looking closely at the international efforts trying to pave a way towards some kind of long-term stability in this very volatile region.
And we should mention the intelligence and the analysis you're about to hear. It's generated using reporting extracted by Stylo News. That's the AI-powered news application. And this deep dive is brought to you by our sponsor, ProWave AI.
Wow.
Okay, let's start with the core event that really shaped this past week, the reinstatement of the ceasefire. The original truce, established back on October 10th, 2025, was severely tested by sudden spike in violence. Then, on October 29th, the ceasefire was put back in place. This followed heavy Israeli airstrikes on the 28th and 29th, which tragically led to the deaths of 104 Palestinians.
Yes, and what's immediately striking is the intensity of the accusations flying back and forth about why the truce broke down. Israel justified its, powerful strikes by stating they were a direct response to an attack by Palestinian militants that killed an Israeli soldier. Prime Minister Netanyahu specifically ordered what he called powerful retaliatory strikes, and he squarely blamed Hamas for breaking the agreement.
And Hamas naturally offers a counter-narrative. They completely deny responsibility for those particular attacks, and at the same time, they condemn the Israeli strikes as clear violations of the ceasefire themselves. It really seems the only thing moving quickly is the blame game over who shot first.
Precisely. And this deep lack of trust, it has immediate, very painful consequences on the ground, especially when it comes to the humanitarian side of the ceasefire deal. We saw a critical flashpoint develop around the return of the remains of deceased hostages. Hamas delayed this. They cited severe difficulties, logistical challenges really, due to the sheer scale of destruction inside Gaza.
But the Israeli government, viewing this through that lens of mistrust, accused Hamas of stalling intentionally, trying to keep leverage. It just highlights the immense challenge, doesn't it? Maintaining any diplomatic progress when every single action is interpreted as a calculated tactical move by the other side.
And if we trace those broken promises down to the local level, the situation inside the Gaza Strip is, frankly, dire. The airstrikes hit densely populated areas. This resulted in significant loss of life, massive destruction. Neighborhoods like Sabra, the Bureij refugee camp, hit hard.
The humanitarian conditions have undeniably worsened. This renewed violence displaced so many families who had perhaps just started returning. And it significantly increased the fear among residents. People who had genuinely hoped that the initial ceasefire might finally bring some relief, some stability. That hope was crushed very quickly.
Nationally, looking at Israel, the government is maintaining a very hardline stance. It's focused on deterrence, on security. Prime Minister Netanyahu continues to frame these retaliatory strikes as absolutely necessary for ensuring Israel's long-term national security. Swift action as the only effective deterrent, essentially.
Meanwhile, the U.S. response has been quite firm in its support for Israel. President Trump publicly defended Israel's right to self-defense, and Vice President Vance even downplayed the risk these specific clashes posed to the wider regional peace deal. He affirmed confidence in the deal's durability overall. That sounds, remarkably optimistic given the recent violence.
It is optimistic, yes, and it really underlines the challenge of keeping diplomatic partners aligned. Take Europe, for instance. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz faced direct condemnation from Hamas simply for justifying Israel's military actions as self-defense. It just shows how sensitive the whole political atmosphere is. Even a statement of support from an ally can be seized upon, to highlight global divisions and escalate political tensions.
What's quite fascinating here, though, is that while this immediate conflict simmers, there are significant steps towards longer-term normalization happening elsewhere. We saw a really forward-looking diplomatic development. Kazakhstan announced its intention to join the Abraham Accords. That meeting is set for November 6th and 7th, 2025.
That development is highly significant. Kazakhstan is a major player in Central Asia, predominantly Muslim population. Its potential entry really broadens the geopolitical reach of this peace and normalization framework, well beyond the immediate Middle East. It suggests this whole normalization process is actually gaining considerable momentum, globally speaking.
Right. So the central strategic development we really need to analyze now is the proposed plan for post-conflict stabilization. This is being spearheaded by the United States. We're talking about the proposal for an International Stabilization Force, or ISF, intended for Gaza.
That's correct. The proposed ISF would operate under a clear but very ambitious 2-year mandate. Its goals are essentially threefold: secure borders and protect civilians, enforce the demilitarization of Hamas, and train a completely new, unaffiliated Palestinian police force. Basically, this force is designed to step into the security vacuum that's inevitably going to exist after a major conflict withdrawal.
The immediate strategic question, though, is whether those goals can even be achieved at the same time. Can a force both enforce a highly sensitive demilitarization and protect civilians without immediately getting sucked into the conflict itself?
That is the absolute core question facing the decision makers. And those decision makers, they are already deeply divided. Israel, through leaders like Netanyahu and Defense Minister Katz, insists on the complete disarmament of Hamas. And they maintain the right to approve or veto all participants in the ISF. They've specifically rejected Turkey and Qatar getting involved, citing security concerns about their links to Hamas.
But this is where we see a potential fracture, even within the American political front. Secretary of State Rubio, while championing the overall peace plan, has very publicly condemned Hamas for allegedly stealing humanitarian aid in Gaza. That reinforces the call for demilitarization. Yet, almost at the same time, President Trump highlighted Turkey's pivotal role within the broader peace framework.
And that creates a very clear point of strategic tension, doesn't it? Is the U.S. prepared to risk alienating its key security partner, Israel, to get Turkey, a major NATO ally, involved in the stabilization? This internal U.S. contradiction, well, it suggests that stabilizing the wider region might be taking priority over strictly following Israel's security approval process.
Despite all this high-stakes politics, Hamas has apparently continued to adhere, at least partially, to the agreements. They've returned the remains of deceased hostages, including U.S. citizen Omer Nutra and a Tanzanian citizen. It shows they're still using the remaining hostages and their weapons cache as effective leverage, however tragic, in these very sensitive negotiations.
And regarding who might contribute troops to this ISF, we know Indonesia, Egypt, and Azerbaijan have expressed a willingness. Egypt is expected to host the command center. This regional buy-in is crucial. However, it also brings up that critical strategic distinction articulated by Jordan's King Abdullah II.
Yes, King Abdullah advocated for a peacekeeping mandate, not a peace-enforcing one for the ISF. Could you just quickly explain for our listeners why that specific wording is so vital?
It's absolutely fundamental. It's really the difference between stabilization and active conflict. A peacekeeping force monitors a ceasefire, maintains stability after the fighting stops. A peace-enforcing force, on the other hand, has a mandate to actually engage armed groups, to enforce disarmament, potentially through combat. So King Abdullah is essentially warning, if this ISF is mandated to enforce demilitarization, it will immediately become a combatant. And that risks dragging regional neighbors much deeper into the conflict, potentially threatening the entire stability framework they're trying to build.
Now, when we look at the sources covering these events, we see a really distinct divergence in focus. It's quite telling. Outlets like Al Jazeera, for example, focus heavily on the humanitarian cost, the civilian casualties, the reaction on the ground to the violence.
Right, and you contrast that with sources like Fox or NewsX. Their emphasis shifts towards Israeli security needs, official statements from U.S. and Israeli leaders, the sort of geopolitical architecture of the peace plan negotiations. The focus moves from the immediate human impact to the broader political maneuvering.
And thanks to the intelligence that Stylo News synthesized, we've actually been able to analyze social media sentiments, specifically on X, formerly Twitter, to gauge the collective emotional response.
Yes, and this is where the depth of the analysis really matters. The AI engine uses technologies like RAG and vector search. That means it's not just scanning for keywords across different languages. It actually reads and understands the context, the emotional tone of the content. That's how we can confirm that the overall polarity, the general feeling in the online conversation, is overwhelmingly negative. It's driven by deep frustration over this persistent violence.
The data really backs that up clearly. Hashtags related to the conflict itself, like #Gaza or #military, show very strong negative sentiment. We're talking 75 to 85% negative. The discussions under those tags, almost entirely focused on the human cost, the destruction, and these urgent pleas for aid.
Similarly, sentiment around #Israel and #Hamas is also highly negative. It reflects those deep, seemingly intractable divisions over arguments about self-defense versus aggression.
The only indicator suggesting any glimmer of hope, perhaps, is found in the #peace hashtag. While the overall sentiment there is mixed, it does show the highest level of neutral or even positive sentiment, around 40% positive.
Right, and that positive sentiment seems driven by advocacy for ceasefires, for long-term solutions. It suggests that even though skepticism about immediate success runs very high, the underlying desire for stability remains a primary goal for a significant part of the public discourse. Looking ahead now, there are several key, very high-stakes developments that you should definitely watch for as these stabilization efforts try to move forward.
The most critical, probably the most immediate challenge, is the UN Security Council debate and the potential vote on that U.S. draft resolution for the ISF. This is absolutely vital for deciding the force's exact mandate. Will it be peacekeeping or peace enforcing? And for setting a timeline for deployment. Right now, the expectation is sometime early 2026.
At the same time, we absolutely have to keep monitoring the situation on the ground, especially Israel's ongoing, intensified military operations, particularly down in the Rafah area. They're targeting known Hamas tunnels there, and these military actions are happening right alongside the high-level negotiations over returning the remaining hostage bodies.
Diplomatically, keep an eye on the calendar for key international meetings, specifically the Istanbul-Gaza meeting that's scheduled for November 2025. It's set to bring together foreign ministers from the UAE, Indonesia, Qatar, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan, all crucial regional and global players.
And finally, the continued efforts, the ongoing negotiations for the full return of all remaining hostages and bodies. This remains paramount. It's arguably the single most critical confidence-building measure needed for any long-term peace process to gain real sustainable traction. It's fundamental.
Now, the comprehensive intelligence that we've been discussing today, it was extracted and synthesized by the Stylo News AI engine. This engine works by gathering, translating, and analyzing information from over 250 sources across more than 20 languages, and it does this in under 60 seconds using advanced vector search and RG technology.
Right, and Stylo News provides such critical insight because it moves beyond just simple keyword matching. It actually reads and understands the full context, the nuances within complex multilingual data. This allows you to get past the headlines very quickly and really grasp the full geopolitical picture.
Stylo News is available both as a mobile app and on your computer. It allows you to customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs, pulling instantly from hundreds of traditional news sources and social media platforms like X. We really encourage you to subscribe. Get AI-powered news on demand at www.stylonews.com. You can check out the free trial and the executive plans available right now.
And before we wrap up, let's leave you with a final, perhaps provocative thought to consider. Given Israel's very explicit rejection of Turkish involvement in any stabilization force, and considering the absolute necessity of a legitimate UN mandate, what non-military leverage point, other than the immediate return of hostages, what will ultimately prove most critical in securing that needed international consensus for the Gaza stabilization force?
That's a compelling question, sitting right at that intersection of diplomacy and perhaps economic reality. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We really appreciate you taking the time to process this critical information with us today. Feel free to request topics for future deep dives, and do follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms. Goodbye for now.